Chaos erupted in a Los Angeles courtroom this morning, as legendary actor Harrison Ford found himself at the center of a political and legal firestorm. What began as a routine testimony spiraled into a dramatic clash of power, prejudice, and principles. The packed courtroom buzzed with a restless murmur as the clock above the judge's bench ticked past 9 a.m. The witness chair remained empty. Camera flashes from the press pool flickered intermittently like nervous lightning. All eyes were on the heavy oak double doors, waiting for one man, Harrison Ford. 10 minutes late. At precisely 9:13 a.m., the doors swung open, and the unmistakable figure of Ford strode in, trench coat over one arm, calm despite the murmurs swelling around him. His salt and pepper hair was windblown, his brow tense but composed. The man looked like he had just stepped out of a movie. Except this wasn't fiction. It was very, very real. "Mr. Ford," the bailiff intoned sharply as the actor made his way to the front, "you were expected at 9. "I received an emergency call," Harrison replied, his voice even but clipped. "My daughter's medical alert system triggered a false alarm. I stayed long enough to confirm she was safe." The judge didn't flinch. Behind the bench sat Judge Raymond Kessler, a man whose reputation for rigid courtroom decorum was matched only by the political fire he courted outside it. Known in legal circles for his deep connections to conservative think tanks and his frequent appearances on right-wing talk shows, Kessler leaned forward now, his lips curling. "A phone call does not excuse contempt of court, Mr. Ford," he said, his voice steely and loud enough for the gallery. "We are not on a film set. We deal in reality here." Harrison's jaw tightened. He remained standing, not yet sworn in. "I apologize for my tardiness, Your Honor," he said, "but I'd hope the court could show understanding when a family member's safety is concerned." The judge banged the gavel. "Contempt. $1,000. Payable by close of business today." There was a beat of stunned silence. Even some in the gallery gasped. The reporters looked up from their keyboards. Ford didn't blink. He walked to the stand, nodded at the bailiff, and took the oath. He was here to testify in the high-profile trial of Everett Chase, a former co-star of Ford's, from a political thriller released nearly a decade prior. Chase had been accused of using insider information gleaned during production, some of it disturbingly close to real intelligence, to facilitate a massive financial scam involving foreign investors. Ford, it turned out, had once confronted him privately about the behavior, unaware how deep the deception went. But now his role as a witness had been overshadowed by a far more dangerous dynamic, a judge with a personal axe to grind. Ford had recently taken public political stances that ruffled feathers in certain corners of the judiciary. His campaign efforts in support of Kamala Harris had been passionate, sincere, and often pointed, especially when it came to former President Donald Trump. He had participated in rallies calling for accountability in public office and had even helped fund a media campaign urging artists to boycott Trump's 2024 re-election bid. Kessler, an open supporter of Trump's judicial appointments and a vocal critic of what he called Hollywood's leftist elite, had never forgotten. Nor, it seemed, forgiven. As Ford answered the prosecution's questions, the tension mounted. Judge Kessler interrupted multiple times to redirect or clarify procedural points that no one else in the courtroom seemed confused about. When the defense stood to object, Kessler allowed it. When the prosecution raised its voice, he scolded them for dramatics. Ford kept his answers factual, grounded. He stuck to dates, observations, and what he had personally witnessed. But the atmosphere was tight, claustrophobic. Every word felt like it had to fight through barbed wire just to reach the jury. During a recess, Ford sat quietly with a glass of water in a side room. His attorney leaned in. "He's targeting you," she said under her breath. "And it's not just because you were late." "I know," Harrison said. "You're not imagining it. I've seen Kessler work. He wants to rattle you, box you into contempt again, make you crack in front of the jury. He's looking for an excuse to discredit you." Ford let out a long breath. "Then we don't give him one." Back in the courtroom, Judge Kessler was waiting. As Ford took the stand again, the judge leaned forward, laced his fingers together. "Mr. Ford, before we proceed, I must ask, are you here as a citizen or as a political spokesperson today?" A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery. Ford looked straight at him. "I'm here under subpoena, Your Honor. As a citizen. Not that the Constitution prevents me from being both." Kessler's eyebrows raised. "I don't recall asking for a civics lesson, Mr. Ford." "No, but it seems like you could use one," Ford said flatly. Gasps. A woman in the back row whispered, "Oh my God!" The gavel slammed. "Mr. Ford, you are skating dangerously close to a second contempt charge. I understand the law well enough to know that respectfully challenging bias is not contempt," Ford replied. Judge Kessler's nostrils flared. "Bias?" Ford met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, bias, political bias, against me, against my right to speak freely. And if you're going to threaten me for calling it out, we're going to have a different kind of legal issue on our hands." The courtroom fell silent. The moment stretched. It was the kind of silence that comes before the break in a thunderstorm. Outside the courthouse, news vans were lining up. Clips of Ford's confrontation had already leaked to social media. The words, "contempt of court" and "actor challenges judge's bias" were trending. Back inside, the judge leaned back in his chair. "You've made your position clear, Mr. Ford," he said. "Let's hope it doesn't cost you more than $1,000. But the undercurrent had shifted. The air in the room had changed. The gallery could feel it. Ford wasn't just on trial today. Something bigger was, and the storm was far from over. By the afternoon session, the courtroom had transformed. Reporters who had once arrived half-heartedly were now shoulder to shoulder in the press box. More camera crews loitered outside. Courtroom artists scribbled furiously. On social media, hashtags like Nanir Ford vs. Kessler and Bias in Black Robe trended globally. But inside, the tension was colder, quieter, the kind of quiet that prickled the skin. Harrison Ford sat back on the witness stand, unmoved by the swirling media circus outside. His eyes never left Judge Kessler. Not when the gavel slammed. Not when the prosecution resumed their questions. Not when the judge coughed pointedly during his answers. There was a war going on, not with fists, not even with words, but with control. And both men knew it. "Mr. Ford," said Assistant DA Monica Reyes, pushing her glasses up as she flipped through her notes. "You mentioned in your previous testimony that Everett Chase discussed encrypted communications on set. Can you elaborate?" Ford nodded. "We were filming a scene involving a surveillance sting. Everett, out of character, started explaining how real surveillance teams avoid detection, even from military-grade AI. I asked him where he got that kind of intel. He said, and I quote, 'real friends in high places.' I thought he was bluffing." Reyes: "Did you report this to anyone at the time?" "No, I thought it was ego. We were actors, playing spies. I didn't think he was, actually, facilitating anything." Before Reyes could follow up, Judge Kessler interrupted. "Miss Reyes, let's stay focused on relevant facts. We're not here to dissect Mr. Ford's memory of off-camera banter." She turned, surprised. "Your Honor, the defendant is accused of exploiting insider knowledge to commit financial fraud. The origins of that knowledge are central to the case." Kessler raised his eyebrows, slow and theatrical. "Be that as it may, this is not the time for Hollywood nostalgia." Ford shifted forward slightly. "Excuse me, Your Honor." "Mr. Ford," Kessler cut in, voice sharp, "you are not permitted to address the court unsolicited." Another outburst and, "With respect, I have the right to respond if my credibility is being undermined," Ford said evenly. The judge sat back. He didn't respond immediately, just stared. "You're testing the limits of my patience," Kessler said finally, "and the limits of this courtroom's tolerance for grandstanding." Ford leaned back in the witness chair. "No, I'm testing your ability to remain impartial." A gasp, audible this time. Someone dropped a pen. Kessler's jaw twitched. "Bailiff," he said coolly, "please remind Mr. Ford that this is a court of law, not a stage for his political grievances." The bailiff hesitated. Just a beat. Just long enough to show uncertainty. Reyes stepped in. "Your Honor, the witness has shown no signs of political posturing. He's stating the facts and responding to courtroom hostility." "Are you accusing this court of misconduct?" Kessler snapped. "I'm saying this witness is being held to a different standard," Reyes replied. "Because he is not above the law," Kessler shot back. Despite what his fans on Twitter believe, that was the moment. Ford turned slightly. Not to the judge, to the gallery, to the jurors, to the people. "I've spent my life portraying heroes," he said, voice steady. "But I know I'm not one. I know what a real hero is. It's someone who tells the truth even when it's inconvenient, especially when someone in power is abusing it." "Enough!" Kessler slammed the gavel again. "Contempt." "No!" Ford cut in. This time the entire room flinched. "I'll pay your fine. Again. But it won't buy my silence. I won't stand here while you twist a legal proceeding into a personal vendetta." Judge Kessler's eyes narrowed. His fingers tapped once on the bench. "This court is adjourned for 1 hour. And Mr. Ford, pray that when we return, you remember who holds the gavel in this room." The gavel slammed once more. Outside, the story had exploded. Ford's quotes were already clipped and plastered across headlines. "Abusing power. Won't buy my silence." And "Real heroes tell the truth." Back inside the courthouse, security escorted Ford to a side conference room. He sat across from Monica Reyes, arms crossed, anger smoldering beneath the surface. "Is anyone looking into Kessler's connections?" he asked. Reyes glanced at the closed door. "Not officially, but yes. Off the record, I've flagged his rulings over the past 6 years. Overturn rates, patterns, donations, political affiliations. Oh yeah, deep roots in the Freedom Restoration League. That's not just pro-Trump, that's MAGA militant. He's ruled in favor of every defendant backed by right-wing donors and hammered anyone with links to progressive causes." Ford nodded. "So what now?" "We keep going. Keep the pressure on. But if you raise your voice again, he'll try to ban you from testifying. Or worse, jail time." "Let him try," Ford said. When court resumed, there was a different energy in the air. The kind that comes when a wildfire begins to breach containment. Judge Kessler's robe looked heavier, now like it hung with the weight of public attention. He leaned into the mic. "Let the record show that this court is under unprecedented scrutiny due to the witness's comments earlier. I will not allow this to become a media circus." Ford returned to the stand. Reyes resumed. "Mr. Ford, did Everett Chase ever reference his political views in connection to the financial scam?" Kessler jumped in again. "Miss Reyes." "Your Honor," Reyes said calmly, "if you interrupt again without cause, I will file a formal complaint of judicial interference." That stopped him cold. Ford answered, voice steady. "Yes, Everett said he was leveling the playing field, that too many liberals controlled the narrative. He said he was doing patriotic business, whatever that means." The room was dead silent, and then a voice, low, from the jury box. "What did you just say?" one juror whispered. Kessler turned like a snake. "Juror number 4, you are not to speak." But the juror didn't back down. "We're hearing testimony. We have a right to understand the context." Another juror chimed in. "We've all seen how you're treating him." The judge's face flushed. "I will hold this entire courtroom in contempt if I have to." Ford's eyes narrowed. Then he looked straight at the judge and said, "You already have." There was no gavel this time, only silence, because the storm wasn't just inside the courtroom anymore. It was spreading. The moment those words left Harrison Ford's mouth, the courtroom changed. The silence wasn't stunned anymore. It was watchful, waiting. The kind of quiet that comes when people realize something historic might be happening and they don't want to miss a second. Judge Kessler sat frozen on the bench, his mouth slightly open, mid-breath. He hadn't expected it. Not the defiance, not the jurors speaking up, not the world outside taking notice. But it was too late to back down. He banged the gavel hard. "This court is now in recess for the remainder of the day." The bailiff stood up. Ford stood up. Reyes stood up. Everyone stood up, but no one left. No one moved. "Court is in recess," the judge repeated, louder, as if volume alone would erase what had just happened. Then Ford, as if stepping back into a familiar role, turned slowly and looked at the jury. "If this courtroom is supposed to represent justice," he said calmly, "then it's time we ask who it's serving." Kessler stood, pointing a trembling finger at the witness stand. "Mr. Ford, leave, now, or I swear—" A voice came from the back of the room. "Let him speak." Another. "We're citizens. We deserve to hear this." Kessler turned red. The bailiff hesitated. Then something unprecedented happened. He didn't move to restrain Harrison. He just stood still. Ford took a single step forward. "I didn't come here to make a speech. I came because I was subpoenaed to testify. And I did. I told the truth. But what I've seen since walking into this courtroom, what everyone's seen, is something else entirely." Reyes gently touched his arm. "Harrison, that's enough. For now." Ford looked at her, then at the judge. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "With counsel and cameras." Kessler's lip curled. "Get out." Outside, the crowd had tripled. Protesters had gathered, some with signs quoting Ford's words, some chanting, "Buy us off the bench." News anchors were reporting, live from every major network. Video from inside the courtroom had already gone viral. Millions were watching now. By the time Ford reached the courthouse steps, microphones were shoved in his face. "Mr. Ford, are you going to press charges against Judge Kessler? Do you believe this courtroom is politically compromised? Is this about your support for Kamala Harris?" Ford paused, squinting into the chaos. He didn't give them the soundbite they wanted. "Not yet. I'll speak when I know it won't be twisted," he said. "And when I do, it won't just be about me." Later that evening, in a modest office 2 floors below ground level in the same courthouse, Reyes sat across from a contact she trusted. Marisol Vance, an internal judicial ethics investigator. "I need a quiet look into Kessler's prior rulings," Reyes said. "Every case involving a public figure, especially anyone with known political leanings." Marisol raised an eyebrow. "This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain actor turning the judicial system into a media firestorm? This has to do with justice being compromised," Reyes replied. "And if Kessler's pattern holds, there's a real problem here." Marisol hesitated. Then she slid a folder across the table. Already on it. "You didn't hear that from me." That night, Ford sat alone in his hotel room watching footage from the courtroom. His phone buzzed constantly. Texts from friends, calls from lawyers, messages of support from celebrities and activists alike. But one message stood out. A voicemail from a retired judge. "Harrison, this is Judge Langford. I watched the footage. That wasn't courtroom decorum. That was retaliation. If you choose to pursue a complaint, I'll stand behind you." He sat quietly for a moment after the message ended. Then he called his attorney. "We're going to make this official," he said. I want to file a motion to have Judge Kessler recused from the case. And we go public? No, Ford said. We go louder. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by protesters, activists, and law students carrying signs. No justice under bias. Kessler must go, and Ford fights for fairness. Cable news anchors had taken up semi-permanent residency on the sidewalk. Inside, the courtroom was standing room only. Judge Kessler entered with a tight expression, clearly rattled by the circus outside, but determined to project control. Before he could speak, Ford's attorney Dorian Shaw stood. Your Honor, pursuant to Code of Judicial Conduct Section 3E, we are filing a motion for your recusal based on demonstrated bias and political retaliation against the witness, Mr. Harrison Ford. Murmurs erupted. Kessler narrowed his eyes. On what grounds? Shaw clicked a remote. A monitor beside the jury box lit up with screenshots. Tweets, donation records, public appearances. This court has been tainted by Your Honor's partisan affiliations, including public speeches condemning individuals affiliated with the Democratic Party and references to Hollywood elites poisoning justice. Another click. A video clip began to play. Kessler speaking at a 2023 fundraiser, mocking celebrities who think they can act their way into policy. Click a clip from the previous day. You are skating dangerously close to a second contempt charge. Click. You already have, Ford's voice echoed. Kessler slammed the gavel. This is an ambush. This is political theater, Shaw raised, her voice unwavering. No, Your Honor. This is accountability. Kessler stood abruptly. Until I review this motion, this court is in recess. But no one moved. Not the jurors, not the press, not the gallery. Kessler walked out alone. In the hallway, a reporter caught up with Ford. Harrison, do you think Kessler will step down? I think if he doesn't, he'll be forced to, Ford replied. Behind him, Reyes caught up, her phone in hand. We have it, she whispered. Marisol found a sealed complaint from a trial last year, another public figure, same exact pattern. It was buried. Ford turned slowly, the gears already turning. This is bigger than Kessler, he said. He's not the disease, he's a symptom. Reyes nodded. So what do we do? Ford looked back at the crowd, the cameras, the courthouse. We bring the whole damn system into the light. And the fuse was lit. By mid-morning, the courthouse had become ground zero for a storm that no one could contain. What had started as a routine testimony had transformed into a full-scale reckoning, broadcast live, dissected in real time by legal analysts, political commentators, and millions of people glued to their screens. Inside, the courtroom was bracing for impact. Judge Kessler returned to the bench shortly before 11 a.m., his expression carved from granite. His usual confidence had hardened into something colder, defensive, brittle. On the bench beside him sat a new file folder visibly marked Ethics Complaint, Internal Investigation. Dorian Shaw stood the moment court was called back into session. Your Honor, she began, voice unwavering, we've received confirmation that the Judicial Oversight Commission has opened a formal inquiry into allegations of political bias and judicial misconduct stemming from multiple cases presided over by you. Given the gravity of these allegations and the appearance of impropriety, we renew our motion for immediate recusal. Kessler looked up. His face betrayed nothing. I reviewed your evidence, he said slowly, tapping the folder in front of him. And while I find your theatrics unsubtle, I will not recuse myself on the basis of media pressure and coordinated slander. A rumble passed through the room, but Kessler raised a hand. However, he said, a sudden shift in tone, the Judicial Oversight Commission has requested access to sealed records. They've found concerning patterns in prior rulings. Due to the active investigation, I have been placed on temporary administrative leave effective immediately. There it was. Gasps spread like wildfire through the courtroom. Several reporters stood from their chairs to rush outside and break the news live. A few jurors sat stunned, mouths slightly open. But Harrison Ford sat motionless, eyes fixed on the man who had tried to use the bench as a weapon. Kessler's mouth tightened. He looked down, voice now low. "This case will be reassigned. Court is adjourned." He stood. No gavel, no fanfare. He turned and walked out the side door, trailed by a whisper of shame and the buzz of a career unraveling in public view. Ford didn't speak. Not yet. He simply exhaled, leaned forward, and rested his hands on the wooden railing before him. For a moment, no one moved. Then a slow clap. From the gallery. Then another. Then more. Until the entire room was on its feet. Clapping not for the spectacle, not for the drama, but for the message, for the stand, for the truth. Over the next few days, everything changed. The Judicial Oversight Commission's inquiry widened, to include not just Kessler's courtroom, but dozens of cases he'd influenced. It was revealed that he had systematically penalized defendants, witnesses, and even attorneys who aligned publicly with progressive causes, while granting leniency to those with ties to conservative PACs and donors. Several of his rulings were overturned. Others were placed under emergency review. The State Bar opened an investigation into his courtroom conduct. And Harrison Ford, an actor who had never sought to be a symbol, became one. He gave a brief but powerful press statement on the courthouse steps. This was never about politics. It was about principle, about how power, when left unchecked, becomes corruption. "I testified because I was called to do so. I spoke up because I had to. And I stood my ground because everyone deserves a fair system, no matter who they are, what they believe, or who they vote for. If we lose that, we lose everything." The clip went viral. Again. But something different happened this time. State legislatures began drafting judicial accountability bills. One in California passed within 2 weeks, requiring mandatory political bias training for all judges and forming an independent oversight committee with public representation. Similar bills cropped up in New York, Illinois, and Oregon. What Ford sparked wasn't just a media moment. It was a movement. Even late-night hosts, normally quick to mock Hollywood activism, praised his poise. "Turns out Indiana Jones fights Nazis and systemic bias," one joked. "That's range." Ford returned home quietly. No fanfare, no entourage, just a man who had stared down a system and refused to be silenced. A few weeks later, Reyes invited him to a town hall hosted by law students at UCLA. She asked him to speak. He hesitated at first, but he went, standing in front of a lecture hall, filled with students, future lawyers, judges, and activists. He looked out over their faces, so full of fire, and said something that stuck. "Actors get scripts. You don't. You get real choices, real power. So use it, not to win, but to protect those who can't fight for themselves." The room erupted in applause. As for Judge Kessler, he didn't go quietly. He made the rounds on right-wing media, claimed he was the victim of liberal Hollywood interference, and attempted to frame the entire investigation as a conspiracy. But the evidence spoke louder than the spin. Within 2 months, he was formally removed from the bench. Disbarred, his reputation in tatters, his name became a cautionary tale in law schools across the country. His gavel, once a symbol of unchecked authority, was boxed up and quietly stored in the courthouse archives, replaced by a new judge, one with a record of impartiality and transparency. The trial of Everett Chase resumed under new eyes, and the truth, uninterrupted, untwisted, came to light. Chase was convicted on all charges, and Harrison Ford never once had to raise his voice again. In the end, it wasn't the confrontation people remembered. It was the calm, the way Ford stayed composed under fire, The way he used truth, not theatrics, to reveal the cracks in a powerful institution. The way a courtroom, once controlled by a biased gavel, was reclaimed by those who believed justice belonged to everyone. He returned to his work, his family, his quiet life. No more cameras. No more podiums. But his stand left a mark, not in headlines, in history.